Seminar. This one is entitled ISTQB and Test Automation, how ISTQB certification prepares you for automated testing. Our presenter today is Andrew Polner. We're delighted to have Andrew with us. Andrew is the president and CEO of ALP International Corporation, which is an organization that works in the area of test process improvement and in the use of test automation, how appropriate, to bring efficiency and effectiveness to the testing process. ALP has been around since 1993. As an early adopter of test automation and quality assurance tools, Andrew has built a consulting and training practice serving multiple industries. Andrew's also published articles on software testing and automation and regularly speaks at major national and international testing conferences. Andrew is the vice president of ASTQB, the American Software Testing Qualifications Board, and he is standardizing tester certifications, which standardizes tester certifications, of course, in the U.S. He also chairs the Expert Level Test Automation Working Party, or ISTQB, which is the international umbrella that includes ASTQB and is the worldwide tester certification body. At this point, I would like to welcome Andrew, and Andrew, take it away.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you happen to be attending. Glad to have all of you with us. Thanks again for the generous introduction. We are very excited about test automation here at ISTQB and ASTQB. I'd like to tell you more about what we have in the program. So we'll start out by way of introduction. First, I'm going to cover just a little bit about ISTQB and ASTQB. I know that most of you by now should know the difference between the two, but I know that sometimes that can be a little confusing. Then we'll talk about the importance of automation in testing. We'll cover topics that are covered specific to automation in the various ISTQB syllabi. We'll then discuss business outcomes as they pertain to the expert level syllabi, and then we'll dig into the details of expert level syllabi and what it has available with respect to automated testing. So just to give you a sense, worldwide, ISTQB is a scheme that is really around the globe. Right now, there are over 50 boards around the world that support over 70 independent countries. You'll notice I put ASTQB on the United States because ASTQB is essentially the American board for ISTQB. So every other country or region around the world has its own member board that supports those regions. And why that's important is because by having localized boards for those regions, they can make sure that the materials are customized for those areas. So in our example with ASTQB, we have exams that we produce that are in American English. In Germany, you would expect, of course, that they have exams that are in German, but the standards by which those exams are developed against are all the same, and they're all put together by ISTQB working groups and working parties, as I myself am a part of one of those. With respect to the syllabi, is really the body of knowledge that comes with the program. So let's talk a little bit about some of the goals for automation in the testing process. Some of the things we've known about for quite a while, and we aspire to, things like fast execution of tests. You know, if it's something that the tool can do for you and execute a script faster, that means that you'll be able to, in the same amount of time, execute so many more tests than you were doing before. At the same time, you know, automation, since it's a programmed script, gives you a repeatable process. As manual testers, we know that if we go and test an application twice in a row, one time we may use a keyboard shortcut, another time we might use a mouse. That then is not the same execution, although it might appear to be the same execution. The automated tool allows us to have a repeatable process. By having more of those scripts executed, and if the scripts are well developed, we then increase our functional coverage, because now we're testing more of the application, and in doing so, we're reducing our risk of deployment. And with automation, as in with any programming, you have the ability to to have data feed those tests, so you can have a lot of variations and permutations on your tests. So some of the concepts that are talked about even in foundation level in terms of data and analysis and things of that nature, equivalence classes, is a perfect application for where you can use automation to help with that process. We also talk about automated reporting of errors. So it's not good enough to just be able to execute your automated test and then spend, minutes or hours analyzing the results. Did it pass? Did it not? Very important to have automatic reporting so that by the time your execution is done, you know that in fact that test passed or failed and what were the issues. Next is low maintenance requirements. We don't want to have an automated environment that's actually more complex than the actual software that's being developed. That does not bode well, and typically those kinds of efforts do not last very long. You want to have something that is well designed, that's modular, etc., that has a lot of reusability, so that from release to release you can adapt your automation, make sure that it's providing a lot of value, but can grow along with the testing process. All in all, automation makes the testing more productive. It helps get away from some of the arduous and mindless key punching. It lets you focus as a tester on your domain, on the expertise, on what needs to be tested, as opposed to the mechanics of how it needs to be tested. And for the project manager and the organization, it makes sure that the projects stay on time and on budget, that the software that gets released is quality software. So let's talk about the body of knowledge. ISTQB has a wealth of documentation across many areas, and the documents that specifically already are covering automation include, believe it or not, foundation level. So most of you on the call, I would expect, have already studied for and taken the foundation level exam. So you'll recall that there is a chapter that talks about automated testing tools. Now at the advanced level, of course, having three subcomponents. There's a test analyst, which is the natural progression from foundation level. There's a technical test analyst, which is for the more technical testing. And then there's the test manager for your test leads and test managers. All three of those modules as well have information on automated testing. And of course, last but not least, the recently introduced expert level test automation syllabus, which we'll be talking about in more detail later. That as well has information, is really all about test automation. Let's not forget there's one more document called the glossary. What's the glossary? Well, the glossary is basically the document that defines all the terminology across the various syllabi. So what's nice about that is that if you are reading through a syllabi and you're not quite sure what the meaning of a particular term is, you can reference the glossary. The glossary will tell you what the definition is for that term. Additionally, what's been added to the glossary recently is a cross-section, so that if you find the term in the glossary, it'll also tell you what other syllabus is using that term. So if you're looking at the foundation level syllabus, you find the term and you see that that term is referenced in advanced level test manager. Now you can go to advanced level test manager, get additional information about that term that you're exploring. So it's kind of a nice and handy thing to have. Now the glossary is just one document. We do not have one glossary for each of the syllabi. It's just one glossary that covers the terms across all the documents. So if we look at the foundation level syllabus, we'll see that chapter 6 is titled Tool Support for Testing. And as you might expect, because it is a foundation level body of knowledge, what we have here as it pertains to testing and automation is really a broad but not so deep level of information. So it's high level information, it's useful information, but it just does not go too deep. So the kinds of things that are covered are the types of testing tools, the effective use of the tools, essentially what benefits there are from using the tools, some of the things that we already talked about, the risks in using tools, and then also introducing a tool into the organization. Things like what's the level of maturity of your organization? Is it the right time to introduce the tool? How do you evaluate the tool? What's the incremental uplift that you can get out of using a tool. So these are the kind of things that are covered at the foundation level. Again, it's good information, it's broad information. It may not be necessarily actionable information if you're really focused on the area of test automation. Now at the advanced level, with Test Analyst, we have Chapter 7. Chapter 7 also covers test tools, but it's not just test tools for automated testing. There are other test tools that are covered as well. Those would include test data preparation tools. Testing is really all about data, right? We need to know what data we're defining to drive against the application. We need to know what data we're expecting from the application, our expected results. We sometimes also need to know what data needs to be in the application or in the database of the application before we even start testing to make sure that our initial conditions are set. So there are tools that help with that. Next, we have the automated test execution tools, kind of really the bread and butter of what we've been talking about over here. Then we have test automation implementation tools. We have tools that allow us to improve the success of what we're doing, figure out, for instance, if we have large sets of data that need to be tested, how do we do that and how can we use the tools for that? And then we start talking a little about different techniques that are used in employing automation. And one of them, which is very popular, is what's called keyword-driven, or sometimes referred to as action words. You know, these are the kind of things where, you know, you may have a particular test that requires you to add a user or buy or sell security. The action words then would be the user or the security, and then you would be able to add or delete a user in a way that's kind of understandable by a functional expert as opposed to someone who's technical. And then finally, we have causes for failures for the automation effort. And these, you know, span a number of different areas, including, you know, maybe you don't have the right feature set in your tool. Maybe you bought a tool that was really easy to use, but guess what? When you're trying to do some more complex testing, it may not have the features and capability that you need for some of the more complex tests. For example, if you need to do some conditional looping or branching, if you need to do API calls into other applications to start other processes, if your tool is just not capable of doing that, you know, there's kind of a limitation there. So this all makes you aware of that and make sure that that you have the right tools that are capable for that. Another area that is important is the skills that the staff have. You know, automation is not really testing, and I'll get to that a little more later. But the folks who are actually going to be involved in automation need to have the right skill set to use those tools effectively, to maintain those tools, etc. Let's move on to the technical test analyst. With technical test analyst, we have, again, Chapter 6, Test Tools and Automation. Here we're talking about integration and information interchange between tools. Many of you already may be using in your organizations tools for test management. I'm talking about tools that are like centralized repositories that allow you to store requirements and test cases. Sometimes they also allow you to store the scripts. Defect management is usually part of those tools as well. And then separately, you may have your tools that are used for the actual execution of your scripts. So when we're talking about information interchange between tools, we're talking about the fact that if you're running an automated test, are those results going to automatically be populated back in your test management tool, or is that yet another step or an extra step that you need to do? Defining the test automation project, you know, these are the kinds of things that revolve around the roles, you know, who's doing what, the tools, what tools are we looking at, and then selecting the automation approach. Is the automation going to be done from the GUI, from the graphical user interface, or is it a command line interface? Is it a mainframe application that needs to be tested, or is it clientless where you have an API call that needs to be made? All those things need to be thought of and considered. We have specific test tools that we can use. We have tools for web-based testing, and from that standpoint, you know, and the modeling of the business processes. Again, that goes back to the user role, whether or not you're trying to buy or sell security, and how you would define that in a way that then can be programmed so that the automated tool will execute that test for you. So that's at Technical Test Analyst. From there, we move on to Test Manager. Test Manager also has a number of sections within Chapter 6 that talk about automated tools. So tool selection, that covers areas about what kinds of tools. Are they open source tools? Are they in-house tools? Is it a vendor-supported tools? And each one of those has its pros and cons. Obviously, a vendor support tool is going to probably cost more money, but you're going to have support from that vendor on the tool. Open source is going to be something that may meet your needs, but it may be difficult to get support for that. And then if you're developing something in-house, that is a lot of effort involved in that. So those are different considerations that need to be made as part of the selection process when you're doing that. Return on investment. So return on investment is a popular term. Everybody, management always wants to know, how much is this costing and how much is this saving us? And well, with automated testing, there are some upfront costs, especially if you're talking about buying tools from vendors. There's also the need to get training. Just because you buy a test tool for your test team and drop it off, for them doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be instantly productive. So it's not just about the tools, it's also understanding the costs of doing business and the costs of doing automation. So there is some training needed there. There might be some consulting that's needed there as well. There's non-recurring costs and there's recurring costs. So obviously once you buy the tool, that's the initial expenditure, and then in terms of recurring costs, there might be the maintenance, etc. So you need to also factor in the fact that some of it is upfront, some of it will continue. Now the tool life cycle, what's that all about? Well, there's really 4 steps that we define in Test Manager that refer to the tool life cycle. So we start with acquisition. That's when you're buying the tool, after you made the proper selection. Then there's the support and maintenance. That's really the life of using the tool to do the automation against the application or applications that you're looking to work. There's the evolution, and that refers to as things change in your environment, your application, the tool itself might need to evolve. Maybe there's a service pack. Maybe there's a new version of the tool. And then there's the retirement of the tool. Maybe that tool no longer serves your purpose. Maybe it was great when you were doing mainframe testing. Now you're doing only web-based testing, so that might not be the right fit. And finally, we talk about tool metrics. What kind of metrics can we get out of testing tools? And this is not just about automation. It's also about test management. So, test management you might want to see how far along are we, what percentage of scripts have run, where are there errors. You want to maybe get a count of how many defects you have outstanding. There are tools as well that help you analyze code and code complexity. So there's a lot of different tools out there that are just a little broader in reach than just automated testing. So that then brings us to the expert level and test automation. So a little bit of history. The test automation syllabus was a concept that started up several years back. I was asked if I would lead that effort, and have been doing so for many years. Initially, we had basically all the information about test automation in one syllabus, and we realized after a few years that it was too much information to try to impart at one time. So we took a strategic decision a little over a year ago, about 2 years ago, to break out the test automation topics into those that dealt with the engineering and those that dealt with the management. Hence the 2 modules, test automation engineering and test automation management. Now the engineering is what you might expect. It's kind of for the people who are really focused on implementing automation, learning and understanding what they need to be doing, what an automated system needs to have, needs to be comprised of. That's what the engineering is for. The management, the vision behind the management is really not the hands-on technical, but the management is really more about managing the process. The test automation process is really more similar to a software development process than it is to testing, because it's a process of mechanization. Test automation in and of itself is not testing, it's a mechanization process. So you need to understand how to manage those things, and anybody who has some software development management skills will understand how important it is to do that properly. So let's look then at the next thing, which are the business outcomes. Now, what are the business outcomes specifically? Well, the business outcomes are what align with what the market needs or what the market is looking for. We can put things out that sound great and that are interesting, but when we poll the market and we talk to people out there, what are people looking to do? So this list here, which I'm not going to read in detail, basically is what the different learning objectives and the text within the syllabi really support. So basically, it's about contributing to the development of a plan to integrate automation. It's about evaluating technology. It's about creating an approach and methodology. It's about developing a new or modified automated solutions. It's about reporting and metrics collection, and also how to optimize testing the assets to facilitate maintainability and address evolving test systems. So that's kind of at a high level what we look to achieve by having a test automation syllabus in place. Now, for test automation management, the business outcomes, which are also present on the ISTQB website, are about policy and strategy, creating business cases which outline the costs and benefits, plans to integrate automated testing within the testing process, overseeing the evaluation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how they differ in terms of what their main focus is. Now, if we look at test automation engineering, this is a released product. There is a syllabus that can be downloaded from ASTQB.org, the American website, or from ISTQB.org. The syllabus is the same syllabus. It's available in both places. And just to kind of set your minds in terms of what's included in the scope of this, so in scope, what we're really focusing on are the different tasks that are performed by a test automation engineer. So we're talking about things like designing, developing, and maintaining automated solutions that are robust. We're talking about the concepts, the methods, the tools, the different processes that come to play in that. And the focus is specifically around automating dynamic functional tests. So what's out of scope for engineering is, of course, test management, because there's a different volume that will cover that. Also, out of scope are non-functional tests, and by that we're talking about things like load and performance testing, security testing. There is a forthcoming security testing syllabus that will cover security testing. Now, another thing that the engineering volume is not about, it's not about teaching you how to program for many reasons. Many different tools have different languages that they use, so we could teach how to program in one tool that would not be applicable to another tool. So that is not something that we cover. We're not teaching you about specific products. We're not going into brand A and brand B and saying this is how you would do it with this tool, this is how you would do it with this other tool. There's dozens of tools out on the market. We let you choose that. We just give you the guidance on what the important things are that you need to be able to do with whatever tool you select. And then selection is the process that we describe, how you do that, but we don't get into the specifics of selecting actual products that are in the marketplace. So if we look at the topics that are covered in test automation engineering, basically the table of contents goes something like this. We start out with introduction and objectives for test automation. Then we move into preparing for test automation. Then we have a very heavy chapter on the generic test automation architecture. That's a really valuable chapter that really goes into a lot of detail. We then move to deployment risks and contingencies, what to do to make sure things go right and what to do if they don't go right. We follow that by test automation reporting metrics. What are the kind of things that you can be reporting on and should be reporting on? and then we go into transitioning the manual testing to an automated environment. We move from there to verifying the test automation solution. We want to make sure that the scripts themselves are running properly. And from there, we have continuous improvement. How do we keep our automated test environment up to date and current and providing a lot of value? As I mentioned before, the test automation engineering and test automation in general is really more like development than it is like testing. So on the left, if we see a software development lifecycle for a system under test or software under test, we start with the analysis, then we go into the design, development of the system, testing of it, deployment, and then the evolution of it. Well, at the design stage, when we know already what it is that we're developing, we can transition that information to our automation. When we do an analysis, we do a design, we develop our test automated solution, we test our automated solution, the code, make sure that it's working properly, and then we deploy it. How do we deploy it? We deploy it by testing our SUT on the left. So, for those of you who have already read through some of the syllabi, taken some of the exams, you know that ISTQB uses cognitive levels K1 through K6. So typically the earlier syllabi, foundation level, etc., tend to have the lower levels. The advanced levels and then the expert levels tend to have the higher levels. And really all it means is that you just need to put more information together and assimilate it to provide an answer. That's why at the foundation level, the exams are multiple choice as they are at the advanced level, although they're more difficult at the advanced level. And then at the expert level, it's actually a combination of both multiple choice and essay. So here's some examples. This is by no means all of the learning objectives out of the expert level test automation syllabus. But for instance, chapter 1.1, purpose of test automation, as you might expect, that has a lower K level of 2, explain the objectives, advantages, and limitations of test automation. Now, as you'll notice, some of these topics that we're covering here are essentially themes that are repeated through previous syllabi. But the difference is that even though they're repeated, we go into more depth. So just like anything else, you know, you can kind of scratch the surface with foundation and then get a little more involved at advanced. But now if you really want to get more information, more details, etc., that's what the expert level syllabi are for, and that's what test automation engineering is all about. So in chapter 2, we have test automation requirements for the system under test and its context. So very much a discussion about, you know, how to make sure that you have an optimal automation solution for the system under test. There's a lot of discussion there. Because of that, you know, the K level for that is a K4, which is analyze. So then chapters 3 and 4, again, here are a few additional examples of learning objectives. Chapter 3 has the test automation architecture, and one of the learning objectives is, you know, to design the appropriate test automation architecture for a given project. So there's a lot of different factors that you need to consider. You know, what type of application you're testing against. You know, what are the roles of the staff. Any number of things that will focus you not only on the technical aspects, but also on the aspects in terms of how your projects are set up. The test automation solution development. You know, how do you create a purpose-built test automation architecture based on the generic GTAA, the generic TAA using predefined components. So again, really understanding what are the different building blocks that you need to effectively create a robust, sustainable, automated test solution. And in chapter 4, we have a technical risk assessment and mitigation strategies. Again, if you become very dependent on your automation and all of a sudden a release comes up and you hit that button, go, and nothing starts, that's a real problem. So there's a number of different ways that you can mitigate that risk, and you need to be aware of those and implement those things, because sometimes things don't work, and you need to have backup plans for that. Now, if we take a step back real quick to the Chapter 3, Test Automation Architecture, this is a really nice diagram that our team put together that's actually in the syllabus. So when you download the syllabus, you'll actually see this. And it's just a wealth of information just on this one diagram. Like they say, you know, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And it really is nice to kind of look at this and then to go into the chapter and read in detail what all these things are. But just real quick, if we look in the middle stack, we have a test generation layer. We have a test definition layer, talks about your test data, the test execution layer, which talks about execution and logging, and then the test adaptation layer. You know, what are we adapting the automation solution for? Is it GUI? Is it API? Is it services? Is it particular protocols or databases? So any number of things that you could be testing against and what you need to be thinking about. Now, to the right of this, you know, we have the management. We need to manage all of this. To the left of this, we need to manage all of these artifacts. A lot of this is going to be code. Even if it's not code, it's going to be data. It could be input data, expected results data, other kinds of data. All of that needs to be put under configuration management so that from release to release, you know what you're testing with. And if something were to go wrong, you can always revert back to your earlier version that you knew was working. And of course, at the very top, there's the project management. This is actually a project that we're talking about here. If we move on to chapters 5 and 6, we see that in chapters 5 and 6, in 5, we're talking about logging of the test automation solution and the system under test, implementing, you know, logging. That's very important. Why? Because number one, you want to make sure that your automated solution itself is working properly and that you're checking it. And number two, you want to make sure that if your application that you're testing has some outputs as well, that you're capturing those in some way. Now, for those of you who have done load testing before, that kind of comes with the territory. In load testing, when you run a test, you're monitoring what the system in the test is doing, or more specifically, what the environment is doing in terms of your system utilization, etc. Even in functional testing and automation, there's a need where you can have logging in place and understand what's going on. Let's say, for instance, that your system under test at some point changes a registry key. If you're not aware that that's happening, and then the script continues at the end of the script, or maybe at the next script, the script's not going to perform in the same way. By monitoring what's going on with the SUT, what it's doing with the environment itself, then it gives you some updates and some ideas as to what you need to look out for, and you can know exactly at what part of running that test, you know, you actually had some change go on in your registry. Chapter 6 talks about criteria for automation. That's always a fun one, figuring out which test should we automate, which shouldn't. There's a lot of right answers, and there's some wrong answers to that. Clearly, if there's something that you automate once a year, it probably doesn't make sense to use automation, because by the time you go to run that test, things may have changed where you basically need to rewrite that test. But between that and things that you need to run daily, if not weekly, there's a lot of things to consider in terms of what the right criteria is. You may have a situation where you have, let's say, 100 scripts, manual scripts today. So do those 100 manual scripts convert into 100 automated scripts? Not necessarily. It could be a one-to-one relationship, it could be a one-to-many relationship, or it could be a many-to-one relationship. So all those things need to be considered. You don't want to just take what you have manually and automate it. You really need to do some analysis, figure out what's best, and then migrate it into an automated environment with what makes the most sense. Finally, the last two chapters, chapters 7 and 8, 7 talks about verifying the automated test environment components themselves. Again, we've seen instances where people run tests and through automation, they think everything's fine, when in fact the automation itself was not running properly. Maybe part of what the automation needed to do was write a file out and that file was never written out. So you need to make sure that the automation is working first before you verify that the application that the automation was testing was actually working. And then finally, planning for implementation of test automation improvement. So what kinds of things can we do, can we include that will make automation better, that will adapt it so that as your application and your environment changes, maybe you have a new JVM that's been released, maybe the test tool that you're using has a new version, that it might support a calendar widget or object that previously you were not able to test, but now the new version of the tool has that. So those are things that you need to be thinking about and continually making the automation environment, as adaptable as possible to what you're testing. Now, for test automation management, again, that's not a release document. It's a work in progress. The topics that we're looking to cover in that would be test automation policy. So here we're talking about things that have to do with overall policy that you want to implement on your project, in your organization, on your enterprise. The strategy, you want to make sure you have a consistent strategy for how you deploy automation throughout your enterprise. You want to be managing the test automation project itself. How do you manage it? Like I said, much like a software development project, so that everything works properly, so you use the right coding notation, so you document properly, so you have everything in the configuration management and control. And the resources. How do you manage your test automation resources? Now, by resources, we're talking everything from the testing tools to the test environment that you're running those tools in, to your people. You need to really manage that to be effective with that. So those are the kind of things that we're covering in that particular area. Now, if we look at the current graphic that shows us basically the ISTQB levels and the various syllabi, if we look from the bottom up, we'll see there's foundation level. Now, for a long time, there was only one syllabus, and it was foundation, and that's what most of you, I presume, on this call are certified at that level. Now, very recently, actually this summer, we released the Agile Tester, which is an extension to foundation. So now, for organizations where you're either doing testing and essentially development using Agile methodology, now you have an ability to get a certification for Agile testing, which is basically an extension to foundation. So what that means is that you still need to have foundation, because that covers a fundamental test process. And then Agile goes into the specifics of what it means to be an Agile tester and how to be effective at that. Now, also at the foundation level, we are working on a model-based testing extension, and that again will require foundation level as a prerequisite. So if we move up to the next level, we have advanced, and advanced certifications have the three components. We have test manager, test analyst, and technical test analyst. Now, these three advanced level certifications have recently been reworked quite a bit. I believe the latest release is just from a couple of years ago, and the major change was that in the past there was a lot of overlap among the three, and the folks who were in the working party that actually worked on that did a phenomenal job of splitting things apart and really making each a silo of its own, so there's really not a lot of overlap. So the test manager is really for the test lead. The test analyst is really the logical stepping stone from foundation, and the technical test analyst is essentially for your technical tester and your developer who's doing testing. And then at the expert level, we have two modules that have come out that include both examinations and syllabi. There's test management, there's improving the test process. Then in the middle there we see test automation management planned for sometime next year, and test automation engineering. Now, test automation engineering was just released to the public July 4th of this year. So it's relatively new syllabi. You may not even be aware that it's out there, but as I mentioned earlier, it is available on the ASTQB.org website. It's also available on the ISTQB.org website. We basically carry the same information on the syllabi. And then there is security testing, which is as well planned for next year. So if we look at the relationships in terms of what's required for what, we see the arrows here overlaid on the whole program and the whole scheme on what's needed for what. But more specifically, in our case, we have the syllabus that's been released. The exam, however, is in progress. So at this point, you can download the syllabus, learn about it, use it. There's no cost of doing that. If you wish to take an exam, that probably will come at some point next year. I don't have any dates, unfortunately, to announce for you, but certainly feel free to download the materials. With test automation management, that syllabus is in progress. So we are currently working on that. And of course, there is no exam at this point. So that's trailing a little bit. And just to be clear, for both of these, they require the foundation level certification. And then for test automation engineering, you're required to have the technical test analyst certification before you actually do the exam for test automation engineering. Now, if we look at the ISTQB program and see certificates issued, it's really a remarkable graph. Again, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So this, if you can read the fine print, is actually the latest graph I was able to get my hands on, and it's only through December of the last year. So we're already in November. We're quickly approaching December of this year. So you can just imagine where we must be at right now. So I believe that sometime this summer, we are past the 350,000 mark. What does that mean? That means that worldwide, there are over 350,000 individuals like yourselves who are certified at one or more of the ISTQB level of certification. The reason why it's had this meteoric rise is because it's an open system. It's an open standard. It's a worldwide standard. You can go to our website. You can go to any other member board's website. You can go to the ISTQB site, pull down all the information, read it, etc. There's absolutely no cost for that. If you wish, you can actually sit the exams without taking a course, or if you wish, you can take a course from an accredited training provider just so you get that extra level of value and understanding on the materials. So again, you have a lot of options on how all of this works. And it's very consistent across the world, like I was mentioning before. If you take an exam in German or you take an exam in English, those exams are, for all intents and purposes, essentially equivalent exams in terms of the level of difficulty, how they're graded, what the expected results would be on those exams. So to conclude, I want to again emphasize that test automation has the word test in it, but it's really more similar to software development than it is to testing. We have a lot of information that you can download from ASTQB.org and ISTQB.org, so feel free to examine that. And as it pertains to the expert level test automation syllabus, the criteria to become certified includes you have to have 7 years of practical experience. You obviously have to be foundation level certified. And for the engineering, test automation engineering, you also need to have the advanced level TTA certification. The plan is that for the test manager automation level, it'll be the advanced level test manager as a prerequisite. But what we want to publish here is the current information as of today, as it stands. And I thank you for your time and your attention, and I'd be happy to receive any questions.
Andrew, thank you. Great job. If you do have questions, go ahead and type them into your questions window, and we'll go ahead and answer those as we get them in. I have already received a couple of them, so let me start with those as well. One of the questions I had is, will there be a certification for load and performance testing?
That's a great question. And when we first started this working group and we're working on some of the initial ideas of what test automation should include, we did actually have performance testing in that. And then we realized that performance testing is such a unique area of testing, and it has its own specific requirements of how you need to do that, how you need to set that up. So we decided it made more sense to put that off on the side. Right now, there is no roadmap that specifically states whether or not there will be a performance testing certification or when that might become. But it is definitely one of the items that is in the, call it suggestion box, so that as ISTQB evaluates what next certifications need to come out, what people are requesting in the marketplace, that will be one that will be evaluated against other requirements.
Good, that's very helpful. Another question that we have in is there a benefit if I take all 3 advanced certifications? Right,
that is a good question. The advanced certifications, I like to think of them as kind of role-based. What's my current role in the organization, or maybe even what role do I aspire to have in the organization? So when you think about it that way, you think about, okay, well, am I working more toward being technical, in which case the technical test analyst is going to give me some additional knowledge and information that I can perform better, or am I getting away from technical and am I really more into leading test projects and collecting metrics and reporting them to management, in which case I'd take the test manager certification. So in terms of role, you need to kind of evaluate what your role is and what makes the most sense. Now, as it pertains to test automation, what's interesting, as you saw in my presentation, is that all 3 of them actually have components of test automation. So you will learn something about test automation with all 3 of them. But if your goal is only to get the test automation engineering certificate when that exam comes out, then really your fastest path to that would be to take Foundation if you're not already certified at Foundation, take the technical test analyst if you don't have that, and then that positions you to be able to take the test automation engineering.
Okay, that's helpful. There was a kind of a related or similar follow-up question from Elizabeth. She asked, will there eventually be expert-level tests that require the advanced test analyst certification? I'm trying to decide what advanced level test to take.
I think what she's probably referring to is the chart. Let me see here if I can back up to...
yeah, if you go back to your chart, I think your chart had a path that followed from the advanced technical test analyst up and the advanced test manager up.
Right.
But there was no arrow from the analyst.
Right. That's a great question. Unfortunately, I do not have an answer for that. I would guess that right now, for instance, we just kicked off the Agile Tester, the extension to Foundation, right? And we're working on the model-based testing. So I would guess that it's highly possible that when those 2 are more mature and they're in the marketplace, that it may be possible to develop a further level of certification that would require test analyst as a prerequisite for that. That would then go into maybe advanced Agile testers or advanced model-based testing. That's pure speculation. Please don't quote me on that. But that's where I would potentially see those 2 going in terms of a path through the test analyst at the advanced level.
Okay, good. That's as good as anything, and I hopefully will get more information from ISTQB and the working groups on that going forward. But I understand why you wouldn't have the answer to that, as you're focused on automation. Here's a question. It says, I received my foundation level certification more than 5 years ago. Do I need to review or refresh the course material before moving on to take the advanced level certification?
That's a really good question. First of all, I'll state that the way the program works, if you have foundation, it doesn't matter if you took it yesterday, a year ago, or 5 years ago, you're good. You know, there's no requirement to recertify with foundation. Advanced level, it's the same thing. So what I do find is that, you know, sometimes, you know, just from getting tied up in the day-to-day things we do at work, we tend to kind of forget some of the things that we learned in a class or that we were tested on through the examination. So I would definitely recommend that if you're going to, you know, go to the next step and take your advanced level, you really have to review foundation, because some of it could just be definitional. You know, the definitions themselves you may have forgotten about, and you don't want to get tripped up over definitions. So definitely reread that. If you took a course, I would also go through the course materials that you have, because that'll have more detail about what you learned. You can obviously read the syllabus, but the syllabus does not go into a lot of detail. That's where some of the courses will provide you additional detail. So look over your training manual if you still have it handy before you actually go into the advanced level course or examination.
Good, that's very helpful. Maybe a quick question here. Are 7 years of testing experience, so related to that prerequisite, is some sort of certificate or certification required from the various employer or employers for whom you have worked during that time period?
Yes, there is a requirement. Much like with advanced level, you are required to affirm that that's true and have a resume that shows that, and possibly even provide a reference that could corroborate that that statement. By the way, okay. I did not finish my thought on the previous question, and that is that when you get to expert level, the expert level certifications do require recertification. The logic there was that these are topics that can change over time. They're not, you know, foundational types of topics, and we do want to make sure that people are current in those areas. So from the standpoint of expert level, I believe it's a 5-year recertification program requirement at the expert level.
Okay. Another quick question, maybe. When in 2015 will test automation management be available? Do you know if it's the first quarter or second quarter, et cetera, or is that still up in the air a little bit?
Yeah, we do not have a release schedule for that at this point, so we don't have a date. Our best estimate is to have something this coming year. Okay.
I'm going to actually answer the next question here, which is, do you have any recommendations for resources or textbooks for the Agile, model-based, and test automation? What I would suggest in terms of resources is that you check on the ASTQB website. There is a resources tab there on the website itself, which carries a list of books, which in fact we're in the process of updating, which will cover a number of those areas. I would also recommend that you check the Training and Education tab, which is under Get Certified, because as I've been told by those who have taken the advanced and expert level exams, and this actually came from a previous webinar, that as you get into those higher level exams, it is certainly more difficult. It's possible, but more difficult to self-study for some of those higher level exams. So you may want to, in addition to resources or textbooks, consider some education as well. And did you have anything to add, or is that pretty well covered?
I think you've covered it well, and you may also want to talk about the accredited training providers that are listed on the site.
Right. Yes. And so to be clear, on the accredited or the training providers that we list under education, what we list on the ASTQB website is the list of accredited training providers. The difference between an accredited training provider and I guess any other training provider that you could find, you know, out on the internet or however you might do that, is that the accredited training providers have been vetted, if you will. Their materials are accredited by ASTQB to be consistent with the syllabus. In other words, if you take the course, you should be getting your money's worth because the training materials are consistent with the syllabus and therefore should cover the information that you need, you know, to have the opportunity to pass the exam. Certainly nothing's guaranteed in terms of passing the exam, but the training materials are consistent with the syllabus, and therefore you can at least have that confidence that you are getting a consistent quality set of training information before you take that exam. One of the questions is, how often are the syllabi or the body of knowledge reviewed? Do you know how, is that done on an as-needed basis, or is there a particular schedule for the working groups at ISTQB?
I don't believe there's an actual specific schedule. I think that it is done on an as-needed basis. I mentioned, for instance, previously that the advanced level syllabi had been revamped just recently with the 2012 edition being the latest. I believe the one before that was, well, maybe Dave, you can help me. Was it 2009 or 2008?
You know, I'd have to look up. Let me look up on the syllabi page. But in fact, if you go to the syllabi page, those are typically dated.
Yeah. So the previous ones were 3 to 4 years before that. We've also seen an improvement on the foundation level syllabus. It's, I think, now in its third incarnation. So a number of things will drive that change. Some of it is if additional material needs to be added, if there's redundancy across other syllabi, if there are errors where a correction needs to be made. So all those particular things can drive the syllabus schedule. And then, you know, as we come up with new topics that the marketplace is saying, hey, these are things we want, then those are just new and we have to add them to the schedule. Recognize, of course, that ISTQB and all of its member boards, we're all volunteers. Nobody gets paid to do anything other than, you know, maybe get paid to actually attend the meeting somewhere if it's outside of your hometown. But this is all a volunteer effort, so sometimes until everybody can get together, work on things, finish things off, it might be a little longer than if it was, you know, a funded organization where everybody got paid to work and spend a lot of time together. It just doesn't happen. You know, we have people all over the world that are participating, you know, across multiple continents. So it's nice because you have, you know, thought leaders from around the world and people that are really passionate about testing, and we encourage people to get involved. You know, even here with American Testing Board, we have a technical advisory group that assists us and helps us with, you know, writing examinations questions or reviewing training materials for accreditation or any number of other things. So there's always a need for people to support the effort, not only locally but then also globally with some of the other initiatives like the syllabi themselves, et cetera.
Right, and I would just add that that's probably the most wonderful aspect, I guess, among other things, with regard to ISTQB and ASTQB, that this is a volunteer-driven organization, and it's not just any run-of-the-mill volunteers. These are software testing experts with national and global reputations for excellence in what they do, and the fact that they're willing to devote their time to create this open standard is really something that I think sets ISTQB certification apart, and certainly, you know, just adds to its credibility in terms of you know, taking that to employers going forward. We have a few more questions here. We're starting to run over a little bit, but I think we can probably squeeze these in pretty quickly. one of the questions is, we are building lots of in-house tools for automation. Is there any guidance or help we can receive from ISTQB, or I guess ASTQB, on do's and don'ts? And I think this probably goes back to, you know, it may be helpful to check with those companies that are listed as accredited training providers. ISTQB and ASTQB themselves, again, being volunteers and working really quite heavily on the standards, the syllabi, the body of knowledge, where all of the certification programs going, are probably not able to help directly, but the training providers are probably a good place to start. Andrew, is that an appropriate answer? What do you think?
I would agree with that. Certainly a worthwhile group to reach out to. You know, the ISTQB working group for test automation engineering, you know, we're really tool agnostic, right? So we made a conscious effort to not focus on any particular brand of, you know, existing technology. Now, in your case, if I heard the question correctly, these are in-house created tools, so that would be even more difficult to kind of understand what exactly has been implemented. I would say that a good review of the test automation engineering syllabus would really give you some questions and go back to the group that's developing these in-house tools and say, are we doing this? Do we have these different layers? Do we have the different functionality that's described here so that this becomes a very modular, reusable automation environment? I think that if you start doing that, you'll start seeing that there might be some holes in your current strategy, and just the syllabus alone will help you figure out what things you may be missing in terms of general areas of functionality that any appropriate architecture for test automation should include.
That's helpful. That's a great tip. Another question is it really required for a CSM to go for Agile Tester certification, as a CSM is already covering most of the syllabi and practices? And I'm not sure, I'm not personally familiar with CSM as a terminology, being not from the technical side as much as trying to facilitate some of these discussions. Do you know what that is, Andrew, or would you like me to ask the definition?
Yeah, could you please see if you can get a definition? I'm not sure what they're referring to. Okay,
so we'll ask for that. And while we have that, we have a couple of other questions. Does the 7 years of experience for the advanced certification, does that include college or university experience, or is that truly must be post-college and in the workforce?
Yeah, that would have to be work experience in the area of testing. Now, we know that there aren't really a lot of colleges or universities that have, they certainly don't have degrees for software testers. They may have an occasional course, but nobody's graduating with a bachelor's in testing or a master's in testing, at least not yet. Hopefully we'll see that at some point. We're all, as I like to say, accidental testers. We kind of stumbled into the profession and loving it despite that. So I would say that unless the education had a significant component that did involve testing, then that would not count toward that.
Okay, good. That's helpful. CSM, and I probably should have known this, but I was thinking down a different path as to what we were talking about. CSM being Certified Scrum Master. So someone with already an Agile certification, the question is the Agile add-on, the Agile extension, appropriate for a Certified Scrum Master, or do they essentially have that covered? Any thoughts on that?
No. I would absolutely recommend that. As a matter of fact, we have several folks who are Scrum Masters who have taken the Agile certification. The nice thing about the Agile certification, the Agile extension, is that it's really very tester-focused. As we all know, Agile isn't just about testing. It's about how you work your entire software development process and how every team member has a particular role. We talk about that in the Agile extension, but there is a heavy focus on what the testing component of that needs to be, which is not the same as what you get through your Scrum Master certification.
Okay, very good. And I have Daniel, just Daniel Gray, just so you know, I'm going to follow up on your question directly in the text box here. But other than that, I think that's all the questions that we have. I did want to let everyone know, in case you didn't see that before, that this session is being recorded. And the recording should be available in approximately 1 week. It will be posted under the Certified Tester Resources page. We may also have it on the Syllabi page, but look under Certified Tester Resources and you will find it there. I want to thank everyone for attending today. I especially want to thank Andrew for taking the time to take us through this test automation discussion. It's been exceptionally helpful, and I look forward to having everyone join us again as we continue these types of discussions and the free ASTQB webinar series on a quarterly basis. So with that, thanks everyone, and we look forward to getting together with you again soon.